In the last hour, we spoke with economist Richard Wolff. And by the way, I want to let you know before we go on that there will be bonus content in our conversation, from our conversation with Professor Wolff on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/The Zero Hour, where I think you'll find it interesting, where we talk with Dr. Wolff about is every billionaire a policy failure? And if so, why? So I think you'll enjoy it. We talk about some other things too, very freewheeling conversation, as they tend to be with Richard Wolff. So check it out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/The Zero Hour. Maybe we'll also put it up on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/The Zero Hour. So that said, let's talk about billionaires a little bit more. Now, you've probably seen those stories. I probably mentioned them to you, maybe even on this show, I don't know. The world's richest 26 people, according to a new report from Oxfam, own as much wealth as the bottom half of the country. I'm sorry, of the world. So 26 richest billionaires own as much in wealth as 3.8 billion people who make up the poorest half of the world's population. That is inequality gone psychopathic, and it's something we should be concerned about. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, well, but I live in the United States, which is more civilized than all that, well, Bernie Sanders said last year that 3 billionaires had more wealth than the bottom half of the American population. Now, PolitiFact, which is one of those groups that, frankly, I think is much tougher on the left than they are on anybody else, looked into Bernie's claim and put their little spectacle eye or whatever, their little monocle thing on, and took a look at Bernie's claim. And here's Tammy Baldwin also said the same thing. She's the senator from Wisconsin. She's awesome. And here's what PolitiFact concluded. Quote, "What we found is the wealth lead enjoyed by the 3 billionaires," and that's Bezos, Buffett, and what was this guy? Bill Gates. "What we found is the wealth lead enjoyed by the 3 billionaires is even larger than what Sanders said." So they own more than half, I guess. Now, why is that a concern? Well, I mentioned at the top of the hour that rich Democrats who describe themselves as progressive Democrats also have an empathy deficit, according to a political science study, recent study. They also care less about inequality than normal middle class or working class folks. So in other words, the people who are shoveling money into the Democratic Party don't care as much about inequality as the average Democrat, much less the average American. And if you don't think that translates into policy, you're wrong. It does translate into policy. And I'll tell you something else, that when you spend all your time, now the Democratic Party establishment tells members of Congress that they should expect to spend 4 hours a day raising money, do their congressional job during the day, and then spend 4 hours on the phone. Now, when you spend hours a day immersing yourself in the culture of the elites that lack empathy about things like social and economic inequality, it is going to rub off on you. I would argue, I talked also in this hour about Joe Biden's, or in this program, about Joe Biden's somewhat insensitive remarks about being sympathetic to Republicans. Now, it doesn't help. I think Joe's a good guy. He spent a lifetime in public service, but it didn't help that he gave those remarks at a dinner for which he was paid $200,000 to appear. All of this is, it's not just being cheap or mean or picking on Democrats. It's basically saying that if we have a money-driven political culture and a money-driven political system, the oligarchs are always going to call the shots. A Princeton study showed that oligarchs almost inevitably get what they want out of our political system. You and I do not. We're going to have to do something about that. And if we're going to do something about that, that means major political change. That means what our friend Bernie Sanders calls a political revolution, and you and I together, we're on it.